All right, so large-scale restoration, huh?
Mm.
This is way more than just sprucing up an old park bench. This is like hitting refresh on entire ecosystems. We're talking about bringing back historical landmarks, even whole communities, and this car series report you gave me, this is like our restoration Bible.
It's wild, right? They're not just talking about turning back the clock. It's way more nuanced than that. It's like they want us to understand the whole messy history of a place, the science behind it, and how it all fits together, like the social impact and all that.
It's like you can't just, like, throw a bunch of plants in the ground and call it a forest, right?
Right.
You need a plan, got to think about what's already there, all those little
Yeah.
details.
And this report, it's like they're giving you that blueprint. Like one thing they emphasize that a lot of people miss is the social side of things. Like think about those river projects, right? Some of them got so caught up in the engineering, like we got to fix this river, that they forgot about the people living along the banks.
And then what happens?
Well, people get upset. They feel like they weren't included, that their needs weren't considered. And then the whole project can fall apart, even if it's got all the science in the world backing it up.
So it's like they say, you got to get buy-in from the community, right? Make them feel like they're part of the solution.
Totally. That's what they call stakeholder engagement, and this report is all about it. You got to involve people from day one, figure out what they want, what their concerns are, get everyone on the same page.
It's like it takes a village, right?
Hmm?
Except this village is restoring an ecosystem or something.
Totally. And that's where understanding stuff like ecological resilience comes in, which sounds kind of complicated, but
But it's actually pretty cool once you wrap your head around it, right?
yeah, exactly. Think of an ecosystem like one of those bouncy balls. Resilience is its ability to bounce back after something knocks it around, like, I don't know, a storm or something.
So it's like giving ecosystems superpowers to roll with the punches.
Exactly. And this report, they actually lay out these like 7 principles of resilience. It's kind of like a roadmap to making ecosystems strong and healthy for the long haul.
And they talk about this whole thing with reference ecosystems, right?
Yeah.
It's like trying to find the perfect filter on Instagram for nature.
Uh-huh. Yeah, kind of. So traditionally, a lot of restoration projects, they were all about recreating a specific moment in time, like saying, let's make this forest look exactly like it did in 1950. And that snapshot, that's your reference ecosystem.
Ah, so it's like the blueprint, like you were saying before.
Yeah.
But this report, it's like they're saying it's not always that simple, right? What makes this whole reference ecosystem thing tricky?
Well, thing is, nature's always changing, right? It's not static. You've got climate change messing things up. You've got people impacting things. So trying to force everything back to some like idealized past, it's not always the best approach.
It's like trying to fit into your genes from high school sometimes. You just got to accept that things have changed.
Exactly. And that's where this idea of dynamic ecosystem management comes in. It's like instead of clinging to the past, you got to work with the changes, roll with the punches.
So instead of saying go back, it's more like let's figure out where we're going and adapt along the way.
Exactly. It's a whole different mindset. You're not just recreating something, you're like understanding the processes that make an ecosystem tick and then working with them.
And how does that actually play out in the real world, like on the ground? Got any juicy examples for us?
Oh, tons. Think about coastal areas, right? Sea levels are rising, storms are getting crazier, so if you're just trying to recreate some coastline from 50 years ago,
You're going to have a bad time. You can't exactly fight the ocean, right? So how do they deal with that, these dynamic restoration folks? What are they doing differently?
So instead of fixating on a specific look, they're like, all right, how do we make these coastlines resilient? Like building up sand dunes as natural barriers, planting stuff that can handle salt, even making artificial reefs to stop those storm surges.
It's like they're working with nature, not against it.
And speaking of working with nature, this report, it's not all just high-level concepts, right? They get into the nitty-gritty, like how these projects actually happen. What are some of the big takeaways?
One thing that really jumps out, they're big on having crystal clear goals. Like you wouldn't build a house without a blueprint, right? It's the same deal with restoring something big, like an ecosystem or a historical site. You got to have a roadmap.
So it's like we need that detailed recipe, not just a shopping list of good ideas, but even with the perfect recipe, you still need the right tools.
Yeah.
What's this report say about the actual stuff they're using to get this restoration work done?
It's pretty cool, actually. It's this whole mix of like old school techniques they've been perfecting for ages, and then bam, a super high-tech stuff that's changing the game.
Ooh, okay, now you're just teasing me. Give me an example. What kind of tech are we talking here? All right, picture this. You're trying to restore this ancient cathedral, right? Centuries old, super intricate carvings and all that. But time has not been kind. Some of that detail is just doggone. How do you even begin to bring that back?
I don't know, there's like a master stone carver hotline you can call or something.
Maybe. But this report, they were talking about something even cooler, 3D spanning. They use lasers to map out every nook and cranny, then boom, they can recreate those missing pieces with crazy accuracy.
Wow, so it's like a time machine for buildings. That's incredible.
Yeah.
But it's not all lasers and algorithms, right? The report also mentioned something about like participatory approaches, which sounds a little more kumbaya than high tech.
And that's the beauty of it. It's not enough to just get the science right, you got to get the people right, too. Remember, this is about more than just checking off boxes on an ecosystem checklist. It's about making something that works for everyone, you know?
So it's about getting everyone on the same page, making sure the community's voice is heard loud and clear in this whole restoration process.
Exactly. And they talk about using workshops, community meetings, that kind of thing. It gives people a chance to speak their minds, toss around ideas, and really feel like they're a part of the solution.
It's that whole two heads are better than one thing, but on a much bigger, more collaborative scale. Now, speaking of bringing things together, I'm curious about these case studies they mentioned. Any standout examples of restoration done right, like the gold standard?
Oh, yeah, they had some really cool examples in there. One thing that kept popping up was how the best projects, they go beyond just like fixing the environment. It's like they're creating something totally new and awesome, something that's both good for nature and good for people.
So, not just putting the pieces back together, but building something even better than before.
Gotcha. Give me an example of one of these success stories.
Okay, so there's this project in China, the Loess Plateau, and they took this totally wrecked landscape and turned it into this thriving ecosystem. And get this, it actually helped lift millions of people out of poverty. See, that's what I'm talking about. It's like this win-win for everyone involved. But this report, they're not afraid to get real, right? They talk about the challenges too.
Oh, for sure. They get into some of the controversies too, especially when it comes to making sure these projects don't accidentally make existing inequalities worse.
Yeah, like we were talking about before with those river projects. If you're not careful, you can end up leaving some people behind in the name of progress.
Exactly. The report stresses how important it is to make sure everyone benefits, that it's fair for everyone involved. It's called environmental justice, making sure things are equitable.
So how do we make sure that actually happens? Because good intentions only go so far, right?
Transparency is key, being open about what you're doing, why you're doing it,
Yeah.
and then you got to keep checking in. Are things actually working like we thought they would? Are we getting the results we wanted? If not, we got to be willing to switch things up.
So it's like, you got to stay flexible, be ready to adapt on the fly.
Yeah, exactly. You got to be willing to learn as you go. And speaking of the future, this report, it ends on a really optimistic note, talking about all the cool stuff coming down the pipeline in restoration.
Okay, so paint me a picture.
Yeah.
What's got you excited about the future of this whole restoration thing? What's coming up next?
Oh man, it's like we're on the verge of something huge. Like the tech they're talking about, it's mind-blowing.
Right.
Satellite imagery that can show you how an entire ecosystem is doing, like in real time. And then AI that can crunch all that data and help us make like really smart decisions.
So it's like using all this crazy technology to actually heal the planet, which is like way cooler than just using it to like watch cat videos.
Yeah.
Right. But with all this tech stuff, what about the human side of things? Does that get lost?
Actually, that's what's so cool about this report. Even with all this amazing tech, they're saying ultimately the success of restoration, it all comes down to people working together.
So it's still all about that collaboration, bringing everyone to the table.
Exactly. And they're talking about like scientists, policymakers, local communities, even like indigenous knowledge holders, everyone bringing their own unique perspective.
Like a giant restoration brain trust.
Ah.
I love it. Well, this has been a wild ride. I feel like we've just scratched the surface of this whole restoration thing.
Yeah.
If our listeners are feeling as fired up as I am, where should they go to learn more? What should they check out?
Honestly, this Cartesi report is like the perfect jumping off point. It's got everything from the big ideas to real world stories and even a glimpse into the future.
It's really got me feeling hopeful, like seeing all this effort going into making things right, building a better future. It's pretty inspiring.
It really is. And it's not just about scientists and experts. It's about all of us, right? Even just learning a little bit about the environment or talking to your neighbors about these issues, it all makes a difference.
So there you have it, folks. Get out there, explore, ask questions, and remember, the future is ours to create, so let's make it a good one. Until next time.